Okay, good afternoon, members, and welcome to this meeting of the Response, Renewal and Recovery Subcommittee. This meeting is being live streamed and recorded and will be made available for viewing through our Council's website. Please can online members remember to follow the good practice guidance, which includes muting microphones and switching off your video when you're not addressing the meeting. Those of you attending virtually wishing to contribute to any item should write to speak in the Teams chat function, and you will be invited to speak in order. Should your question or issue be raised by a previous speaker, please withdraw your request unless you wish to introduce additional information so that we deal with the business as efficiently as possible. The usual standing orders apply, including that any votes will be undertaken by roll call. If any member has to leave the meeting for any reason, please either leave the Teams meeting for that period of time and then rejoin, or write leave in the Teams chat function and then join when you return. This is required to allow us to record member presence. Also, please do not use the chat function for any contributions that are material to the debate. Nick, can you provide the sederant and apologies, please?
Afternoon, Leader. Members, I'm actually standing in for Nick today, so he's got another meeting. We've got 6 members present, 1 member present in Council HQ being Councillor Thompson. I've got 1 apology from Councillor Wilson, and we've got 4 members not present at the start of the meeting being Councillors Crothers, Fairbairn, Ferguson and Johnston. Thank you, Leader.
Tracy, can I just check that we are still quorate with that number of people present?
Yes, Leader, we're quorate.
Leader, you're mute. Come on.
Can't hear you, Leader.
Leader.
Oh, we can't hear us. Okay. I approve of members' remote participation, and do any members have a declaration of interest they wish to make? I've not found the chat yet on my other device. For some reason, it's not showing this one up. So, don't know quite what to do about that one. Right, okay. I'm not seeing anybody saying that they have any problems or that they wish to make a declaration, so that's fine. Can we now then approve the minutes of the meeting held on the 2nd of December?
Agreed.
Agreed, great. And now we have item 4, which is the response update. Richard Greaves and Mark Thompson are here to assist members if they have any questions. Mark, can you please provide an update following the First Minister's statement yesterday? Thanks, Mark.
Thank you, Leader. So, yes, in terms of update out with the contents of the report, First Minister provided a statement in Parliament yesterday afternoon, and to kind of summarise those aspects. We are seeing nationwide, and this has been reflected locally, after a steep decline in numbers of cases in mid-January, there has been a relative levelling off of cases in the past fortnight, and we're seeing, alongside that, we're seeing positive signs in terms of reducing numbers of people in hospital, albeit there are still pressures on the NHS. Locally, 1,356 cases were recorded last week, which is down from just over 1,600 in the previous week, and that shows a significant decrease from the highs of over 2,500 cases per week in early January, but it's still obviously a notable number and still cause for some concern. With regards to the restrictions that are in place, the First Minister confirmed that the current baseline measures will remain in place for now. For example, COVID certification and the requirement to wear face coverings in certain settings. Further recommendations to test regularly are obviously still in place as well, as are the need to be compliant with basic protection measures, and again, the importance of vaccination and being fully vaccinated was stressed. In terms of a couple of specific points, the First Minister noted that the advisory subgroup on education was meeting yesterday afternoon to consider the need for secondary school children to continue to wear face coverings, and gave a commitment to provide feedback at the appropriate time, and certainly in advance of the return to school after the February break. There's been no further information that I'm aware of as yet on that regard. And the further significant item of information shared yesterday was the government's intention to publish its new strategic framework on the 22nd of February after the February recess. And this framework is not only important for the government and the country as a whole, but for the local authority in terms of its considerations going forward as an organisation and as a partner within the Local Resilience Partnership. The framework will aim to support a return to normal that is sustainable. It will give consideration to how COVID is managed as we transition into the endemic phase from the pandemic as well. So we'll look forward to that being published on the 22nd of February and identifying any areas which require immediate action. Other point up for noting is the ongoing emergence of a subtype of the Omicron variant, the BA.2 variant, which has increased fourfold from last month. But I suppose the positive news with regards to that is that there is no indication that there is an increase in its ability to cause significant illness or that it has a degree of vaccine resistance, and the government are not looking at it as a cause for concern at this moment in time. Quite happy to take questions on the contents of the report or the brief update from this point, Leader.
Thanks, Mark. Do we have any questions or comments from members, please? Councillor Davidson.
Thanks, Leader. Mark, thanks for the update. I'm noting what Professor Jason Leach has been saying just at lunchtime, which I think is a sobering sort of a statement, suggesting that we're getting close to the end of Omicron. We're not close to after the pandemic. And it goes on to reference that the World Health Organization thinks that we're halfway through. And given that we've been, I think, grappling with this for very nearly 2 years now, that's a less than encouraging thought. Equally recognising that things so far as Omicron are concerned are certainly improving a bit. Thinking about that statement, it then strikes me that 3.6 and the updated strategic framework is going to be pretty critical to trying to have a sustainable way of doing as much as we possibly can and still managing the pandemic. I was wondering, therefore, whether we have any indication yet in particular of how there will be engagement, and I also note 3.6 talks about consultation. So if we've got any feel yet for how that will be done and what the opportunities for engagement as a tier 1 responder, as a council, we're likely to have, please. Thanks, Leader.
Thank you, Councillor Dave. Sorry, Leader. Thank you, Councillor Davison. As yet, we have had no clear delineation as to the means of engagement with regards to that. All we have is the intention to publish proposals on the 22nd of February. I am sure through local resilience partnerships and as an agency, responding agency in our own right, we will be consulted. And I am aware of the intention for this to be put through Parliament via vote at a later stage as well. So as soon as we receive any further information with regards to that, we're more than happy to share that with elected members, because as you rightly point out, Councillor Davison, this will be really important in terms of our footing as an organisation and the country's footing to deal with what is undoubtedly still to come with this pandemic.
Councillor Davidson, any further follow-up?
No, I think that's, well, no, actually, I suppose just a very quick follow-up then, please, Leader, thank you. Just in terms of how we will be able to be cited on that as members when it comes through. I mean, I don't know whether it's a meeting of this subcommittee or if there'll be some kind of information sharing event that we can have on it. I mean, I recognise our decision making on it might be limited, clearly, in the same way as it has been throughout the pandemic. But I think important that we are cited on it by whatever means is most appropriate. So wondered whether officers had any kind of view on how we might do that in terms of sharing information with members once they've got it. Thanks, Leader.
Mark?
Leader, I might pass to Richard to see if he's had any particular thoughts on that in this regard.
Great, thanks, Richard.
Thanks, Mark. Thank you, Leader. Councillor Davison. We'll make sure that, as we've done throughout the pandemic, that members are updated through a briefing as soon as we get the information available to us. If indeed there's a requirement for decisions, then we'll convene an appropriate committee and make sure that you're cited and you have the opportunity to direct what is required on a local basis. But as Mark says, I suspect the first contact will be through the Resilience Partnership, and as members are aware, we have well-established and tested arrangements in place locally. But I'll certainly make sure that and provide a commitment that members will get an update as soon as we get one, Councillor Davidson.
Thanks, Richard. Councillor Thompson.
Thanks, Leader. Yeah, it was just a couple of questions on the report itself at page 7 particularly. Obviously, the statistics given in the report in terms of vaccination programme progress are all, it gives a region-wide based against the sort of national uptake, which obviously generally is quite positive, but then it identifies in 3.11 some areas or communities where it's a bit lower, but we don't have any data there, just a bit of narrative. So it would be helpful to get, it does say in the next paragraph that while it's less, it's not a sort of significant cause for concern, but it'd be helpful to actually see what those data levels are, or if you can explain what those are, because we clearly know there's a slightly lower rate there. What are those rates? And similarly, in terms of the lateral flow devices which we are distributing, for example, just out of interest, is there any correlation between where the uptake of those are and where the sort of not quite not spots, where the lower vaccination areas are? And the other thing would be the pilot programme in 3.17. That's been running what looks like for about 6 weeks now. Is there any sort of data in terms of the trends or the uptake on this locally, the numbers, is that growing or shrinking, or what's the kind of through flow of traffic for people using that facility in terms of the pilot? Hopefully 6 weeks is enough to get some data in. Thank you.
Mark or Richard?
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Thompson. With regards to the first one, we have been asking colleagues in public health and the NHS to pull that data together, and I can confirm that whilst we haven't actually received the data ourselves quite yet, I attended the Public Health Committee on Monday, and the initial findings of that data with regards to vaccination uptake on a more granular level were articulated at that meeting there. So we should be receiving that in the very near future. And just to be clear, the percentage point difference from the data that we did see on Monday was quite small margins, but happy to provide further clarification to elected members once we actually receive that, and we can give you accurate information rather than just my recollection of what we actually saw on Monday. With regards to the testing aspects, I might pass to my colleague Annie Johnson, who might be able to articulate an answer to the other 2 points.
Thanks, Annie.
Thanks. In terms of a correlation between the low uptake of vaccination and testing, yes, the Scottish Government did undertake a review of that. It was, I would say, mid last year, and there definitely is a correlation in that respect. But what we're trying to do with the community testing teams is to do outreach work and take ourselves into those specific areas where we are aware of them, and make ourselves just more convenient for people to collect tests. So if we're doing more in supermarkets, at the kind of train station at Lockerbie, places where we know there are going to be groups of people, and that's proving quite popular. One of the areas that we know we had a low uptake was in northwest Dumfries. We've piloted just in the last 2 weeks taking that out of the static site that we've got and going into Northwest Dumfries, into sort of around about McDonald's, and I think we increased by 5-fold the number of the uptake of tests in that respect. So we're trying to make ourselves as accessible as possible. In terms of the pilot programme, uptake was high at the very beginning, and it remains steady at the moment, although it has dropped, but that's more as a result of the changes to the requirements for testing. So because now, if you take a lateral flow test and it shows you're positive, you don't need to then go and have a confirmatory PCR. So the demand for PCR testing nationally is lower than it was pre-Christmas. That said, having the availability that we do in the west of the region now is proving popular. We are delivering between kind of 5 and 10 tests per day when we're open there. It's also reducing pressure on the mobile testing units, which are trying to spread themselves across the region and again nationally. So it's being successful, but it's probably not as popular as it might have been pre-Christmas.
Thanks, Andy. Councillor Thompson wants a quick comeback.
Yes, thanks, Leader. No, that's helpful. I think I'm trying to get a sense of sort of numbers. You mentioned there 5 to 10 per day. What would it have been at its pre-Christmas peak? And obviously that's sort of settled down now. And just in terms of the input about the lower areas of uptake, I would welcome if members could be shared that information that was made available at the meeting on Monday, just so we've got the full information in front of us. But I'm trying in my head to sort of get a sense of how many percentage points is low enough to not be too much of an issue, but large enough to allocate additional resources to those areas, if you see what I mean. So we're talking about additional clinics to encourage the uptake of vaccinations, but it's not a big deal, so I'm trying to sort of balance that sort of narrative, if you get my drift. So getting those exact figures would be helpful. Thank you.
Any comment on that, please?
More than happy to share the data that we do have as well, and just to clarify that, yes, whilst the margins are low, I think we're obviously keen to maximise vaccination uptake across the board, and work is ongoing to ensure that that clinics are available as widely as possible and as easily accessible as possible as well, and that will continue in our work and support in the NHS and delivering that programme.
Thanks. Councillor Maitland's withdrawn her request, so next is Councillor Scobie.
Sorry, Leader, it was just on the other question to Annie, I think it was, just about what was the numbers like at the peak of the pilot, and now that they've settled down to 5 to 10 per day.
Thank you. It was around 30 at the peak before the requirements changed in terms of testing.
Thank you.
Okay, Councillor Scobie.
Thanks, Chair. I would premise any remarks I'm making on the back of that. I'm just as frightened of this COVID as I'm sure we all are, and only hope that I can still escape catching it. So I'm just listening to a number of remarks, and let me first put in record the Socialist Group's thanks to Mark, Annie and Richard for keeping us up to speed, up to date with statistics and detail of what's happening on a weekly, fortnightly basis. And it's pleasing to note that the Galloway Community Hospital reopened today. We just got notice of it, but that was a frightening concern to the of Stranraer with seeing it closed with the cases in the Galloway, as it will be in other areas where they were affected in the same way. I don't know if anybody's able to answer these, because I'm looking at what Rob said in terms of the statement made by Professor Leach today in terms of Omicron. But we've had the lifting of restrictions by the First Minister, not wholly, but in part. I hear that there might be the standing down reporting on statistics in the national news. Whether there's any truth in that, I don't know. But, you know, we'll not get the number of cases each day and the number of affected and so forth, number of vaccinations and all the rest. I have asked the question of the Chief Executive of the NHS, Jeff Hayes, and it's really around, are we reaching the point where we are looking at this as a serious bout of the flu? And I don't make light of that. Are we reaching that point, you know, almost like, and I think it's in England, that people have to accept that we've got to live with this virus, and it's almost being equated to that of the flu virus and other viruses that may and might be floating about. I don't know if anybody's able to answer that. Also, to the you know, and I think I heard the First Minister speak of it last week, where she thinks that we're moving towards, and I could be corrected on this one, from a pandemic to an epidemic. You know, so we're moving away from the pandemic into epidemic, and whether anybody can answer that. And it's really my second question, or a question to Annie, and it's Stephen touched on it there, and it's the vaccination in areas where the percentage is low. And I think, Richard, one of you said earlier that of moving a vaccination unit into the Dix Hill, where the percentage was low, so we can identify areas of low vaccination, because in my mind there's no doubt that being vaccinated does fight the virus, Omicron, or whatever the variant is. So, you know, just a couple of questions, Chair.
Thanks. Richard, you're indicating you want to reply.
Thanks, Leader. Happy to kick off, and then Mark and Annie can chip in with your approval. And I think Councillor Scobie, exactly right. We're starting to see now a shift both nationally and sort of locally in terms of the level and scale of reporting as we move from that pandemic to endemic, as Mark has mentioned previously. Certainly the range and level of statistics that we've been required to collate locally and submit to Scottish Government and other agencies has started to sort of change in terms of the data, and indeed reduce. So I think that's all bears well in the continued requirement to now start living with the virus as opposed to eradicating it as was the issue at the start, so to speak. So, you know, lots going on. Interesting Professor Leach's comments today and worrying, as Councillor Davison has said. But notwithstanding that, I think because of the reduction in hospitalisations, the reduction in deaths, and the speed in parallel of the vaccination programme aligned with critical other activities like testing, which are clearly going to be with us for some time. And I'll maybe say a wee bit more about that in a second. But with all those things aligned in a fair wind, I think what we're looking towards, as we said, is a more sustainable picture in terms of how we all live and go about our business in the future moving forward. I think what's critical in all of this, and we've talked about it a little bit today, and I know Serena and I will cover it a little bit in the recovery agenda paper. You know, as we move towards the Triple R team being stood down, and we move towards, therefore, the critical part of key areas of work being transferred and embedded into services where appropriate to those services committees, that work's already started now, so that we can make sure that we've got that sustained picture for things like community testing and support to the vaccination programme, you know, as part of the day job, so to speak, as we move forward. Through you, Leader, happy to. I don't know whether Mark's got anything else to comment in that regard, and Annie, I'm sure, will be able to come back on the community testing specifics to the west of the region and Dix Hill.
Thanks, Richard. Mark and Annie, do you want to add anything?
Yeah, thank you, Leader, and thank you, Richard. Yeah, just to follow up on Richard's point, that we will move at some point from pandemic to endemic, which is basically a situation where we are living with COVID. The key thing in this will be the national strategy, and going back to the publication of the new strategic framework on the 22nd of February, is going to be critical to help shape thinking locally, and to flag up the key areas that we need to do, because whilst once you reach the endemic phase, it might be more predictable, and it might, on the whole, be more predictable. What the country will always need to be mindful of is the emergence of variants of concern across the world, and the fact that that could have quite a significant impact if it is a more pathogenic strain, or it has a degree of vaccine resistance to it. And this is a very, very similar model to what we actually see with the management of influenza, where we actually see influenza as a common occurrence every winter. But in addition to that, there is a requirement for health boards and for partners and local resilience partnerships to have a broader planning framework for pandemic influenza, to allow agencies to appropriately stand up and respond to a more significant strain of influenza affecting the country as well. And it'll be those types of measures and the considerations associated with that that will be part of the strategic framework going forward, and that will be published on the 22nd of February.
Thanks, Mark. Annie, do you have anything to add?
No, I don't think I do. Councillor Scobie, I wasn't sure whether it was vaccination or testing you were asking about specifically around Dixhill.
Vaccination, Annie.
I'll ask Mark to come back in on that point, if that's okay.
Aye, no, it was just something that was said. The Dixhill area and at one time was a low uptake in terms of the booster jab. So really just to get a handle on that, because it does fight the variant. So aye, if you could, Annie, to come back. And delighted with the response. I've got more of a response from the two officers than I did from my question of the NHS. So I really appreciate the response there. And it really touches on what Rob was saying in terms of when we reach the point when, as a council, what announcement do we make, and when is it right to make that at that point? Still on the premise that I'm still as frightened as ever on the whole variant. Thanks, Chair.
Mark, if you anything more?
Yeah, just on the point with regards to any areas of lower uptake with the vaccination, we will continue to work. And now we know that data is in hand within the NHS as well. We will look closely to identify any areas where there are any concerns or opportunities indeed to maybe look at community-focused vaccination opportunities in these areas as well. I've got no doubt that there will be pockets right across the region, and it's not to take away from the massive success that we've seen with vaccinations and the uptake for the wider populations to be congratulated for in Dumfries and Galloway, that we have consistently, as a health board area, outperformed our peers across Scotland, in the south of Scotland and Dumfries and Galloway in particular. So these are relatively small numbers that we're trying to target as well. But in order to do so, we have to make it as accessible as possible and make it as easy to access as possible. And we are very, very keen as a council to take that work forward with the NHS.
Thanks, Mark. I've got Councillor Ferguson.
Thanks very much, Leader. Mark actually kind of answered the question, because I'm on the Public Health Committee, but not as a councillor. I'm there as a non-exec board member. And it was a verbal update, right, Mark? So that there was no written data for us at that time, and we've asked the question. It's quite interesting, this, because it actually ties in very, very similar processes with the COVID stuff with the normal screening processes that the NHS go through, and the lower uptake in areas where SIMD is particularly prevalent. So that was raised. I raised that on Monday, and they've agreed to take that on board and get some information for us. So I think, in fairness, as it was only 2 days ago, we got a verbal update at the committee, and I'm sure when we get it from Mark, we can get around all 43 members. Just as an aside, and I'll take the chance of being opportunistic here, if you go back to the old Public Health Committee, or the Public Health work streams, Richard and I were on that, me as the councillor and Richard as the senior officer support. Currently, we have no councillor representation per se. Yes, I'm there, but I'm not there as a councillor. So I'm actually wondering if there's something that needs to go back to the Community Planning Partnership to say to them, should there not be a place there for a councillor on the Public Health Committee, given it is an NHS committee now, but it covers the whole of the region, and we have a huge involvement as a council in it. So I'm just taking that opportunity, Leader, sorry, to hog the thing a wee bit.
Would that be a matter for the Community Planning Partnership, or not for the council?
So maybe you could
representation.
You could maybe raise it there, or even the leader writing to the chair of the NHS board and saying, can we get a place on it? I see Richard's got his hand up.
Yeah, Richard, I'll bring you in. I know that the Review of Standing Orders subcommittee was looking at external representation, I think probably this morning, but I don't know if that came up. Richard.
Thank you, Leader. Thanks, Councillor Ferguson. No, just to say through you, Leader, with your blessing, I'll take that forward and make sure that we get the response in regard to that. Interestingly enough, the Director of Public Health and I were having a conversation only last week about that very topic, given her desire to ensure that Public Health Committee really starts to get engaged with the wider public service provision and use public health as a tool, so to speak, in terms of recovery in its widest sense, and feeding into council decision making and planning moving forward. So I think it's a really important area, and I'll gladly pick that up and take that forward with your blessing, Leader.
Thanks, Richard, for the offer to do that. Thank you. Councillor Hislop.
Thank you, Leader. It's a sort of quick one. Well, I think it is anyway. We talk about pandemic to endemic. Now, the public out there think endemic means you go to a stage where you have the cold. And once you've got to that stage, life's got to be wonderful again, back to normal, etc. Do you think that we will go through this process and, let's say, March the 4th is pandemic day, March the 5th is endemic day, and all things stop? Or do you see that the public need to be sort of encouraged or educated that although we move to endemic, the move to endemic will be a longer period than one day it's one thing, one day it's the next?
Thanks, Richard. Or Mark, Granny.
Thanks, Leader. Thanks, Councillor Hislop. I think this is where the publication of the government's strategic framework on the 22nd of February will be key as well, because that is not only a document important to us as an organisation, this is important to the wider population, and it will articulate those specific issues as well. And I will have to be careful because I'm not a clinician in any way whatsoever, and don't want to dig into the specifics, but really it's to go back to my point I made earlier about the fact that flu is endemic, but we still need to actually be wary of particular strains, and there's still a requirement to have arrangements in place to address pandemic flu in the event of an emergence of a more significant strain as well. So I think there is absolute clarity across everywhere that's been involved in the pandemic, and we just need to make sure that understanding is there in the public, and hopefully the new strategic framework and everything that comes thereafter will articulate that appropriately to the public, so that there is that understanding.
Ivor?
That's fine, thanks. It's just when you hear people talking in the shop and that, it's, oh, as soon as we get to endemic, that's it, all bets are off and away we go again. I would like to think that is the case, but always wary that there might be a Omega after Omicron, so we'll just have to wait and see.
I think it's almost inevitable that there will be other variants, because it has been mutating and will continue to mutate as influenza continues to mutate. So it's something that people will have to look out for. They seem to be a bit further down the road in the UK government. They're now talking about, I think they have now lifted the self-isolating restrictions, have they not, on people who are ill. And I just hope that doesn't mean to think, people don't then think, oh, well, it doesn't really matter if I'm ill or not. I can just go around mixing with other people and coughing all over them and that sort of thing. That that people will still need to get the message that they have to be careful, even if things are more as they normally are. But they still will have to be careful about spreading it, and that vulnerable people could still get fairly ill. Let's see if there's any. My device has switched itself off, so I can't see whether there's anybody else. Hang on. No, I haven't got anybody else wanting to speak on that. So if there is no further contributions, we are being asked to note the current position. So we're happy to note that. We can move on to refocusing recovery, which is item 5. Got Richard and Serena Dunlop here to assist members if they have any questions. Richard or Serena, do you wish to add anything before members come in with questions?
Thanks, Serena. With your blessing, Leader Serena will give a wee introduction, if that's okay, and then say happy to take questions.
Great, thanks, Serena.
Thank you, Leader, and good afternoon, members. The Community Plan and Partnership Recovery activity is progressing well. The first recovery priority workshop was held in November, and the outcome of the workshop will be presented to the next meeting of the Community Plan and Partnership in March. And this will include arrangements for the multi-agency workforce summit. The next workshop is planned in relation to personal resilience, and it's important to keep pace with this work, and a schedule will be presented to the board at its meeting on the 11th of March. Building on the success of this recovery planning across the partnership, the council management team are replicating this approach, and the council recovery group has been established. It has commenced a rapid review of all the key strategies and plans within the council, and this will provide the opportunity for strategies and plans to be further developed with a focus on recovery. And happy to take any questions. Thank you.
Thanks. Do we have any questions or comments from members? I guess I have one question while others speak. What actually is meant by personal resilience in this context?
Okay, so we're linking that back to the national outcomes in the Scottish Government framework for a fairer future. And it's in relation to 2 of the national outcomes, and that is really to support young people as well as financial well-being. Now, we've got a number of projects and programmes of work taking place across the region, and this can be aligned to community mental health and wellbeing, as well as a lot of leisure activities. And we can update at a later date, but there will be fuller detail going to the Community Plan and Partnership Board in March.
Thanks, Serena. I'll look forward to the discussion we have next month. I've got Councillor Maitland, followed by Councillor Scobie. Councillor Maitland.
Thank you very much indeed, Leader. It's really about the issue of multi-agency working and really to basically to say yes, we've really come quite a long way, but it's a question of hanging on to what we've got. And not letting people kind of slide off into the let's just go off and do our own thing again. And so really, is the community planning partnership, are we going to assist the community planning partnership get this onto the risk register as a real risk and really work at it? It's a question of how we're going to do that and what we're going to do, because I think daylight's a very good thing. I think we need to really expose, if people are not working in a team, then it needs to be out there to explain, what is going wrong, so that we can maybe make it work again. But I'd be very glad to have some sort of comment on that.
Thanks, Richard.
Yeah, thank you, Leader. Thank you, Councillor Maitland. I think your point is absolutely spot on and hits the mark. I mean, and we've had conversations in this regard that the importance of those partnerships and building on the way that we've operated and functioned, not just within the community planning partnership, but also with other agencies throughout the past 2 years, is absolutely critical if we're going to be able to respond to the recovery agenda in the way that we do. That whole social and economic equality, the carbon net zero challenge, a stronger economy, of financial stability are all things that are absolutely critical, that unless we do them in this multi-agency way, given the size and scale of the challenge we've now got, I don't believe that we're going to be successful. And that's been the discussion that's been having at the Community Planning Executive Group and with colleagues across the partnership, is really how we sustain the current way that we operate, or we have operated in the last 2 years. We've identified the 6 themes of workforce, personal resilience, employability and education, digital, place and climate. And what we're looking to do now is to really drill down into those 6 areas across the partnership to identify some real opportunities where a multi-agency approach to doing things differently moving forward will prove to be successful. So I think with that focus, that will allow certainly us to move forward in a positive way. And I can say that the commitment that we've got from chief execs and senior colleagues in the partnership and beyond to that agenda and the way that we're proposing to take it forward has been second to none. So I'm hopeful, and I certainly think that it's recognised that this is absolutely really important. The multi-agency approach and how we engage with our communities, I think, or continue to engage with our communities in a different way, are the 2 most critical things that will see us through the recovery agenda, so to speak. Thanks, Councillor Maitland.
Thanks, Jane. Do you want that?
Well, just to say, Leader, that it is my experience that people at the top of organisations probably have more of an overview and an understanding and a willingness, and it's less threatening actually if you're in the top of an organisation than it is kind of maybe a third down to think about working with your opposite number in another organisation. And it's that, I think, is where we are at great risk, when people do not understand what the other person is trying to achieve or what the other organisation has on its agenda. And it's that kind of risk which I think we really need to attempt to mitigate. I have to say, Leader, that I have been astonished in the past to realise that parts of the council have absolutely no idea what other parts do. Really genuinely do not have an understanding about other sections of the council and why they take particular activities. Education used to be a specific issue that stood on its own. I think less so now, but this is a problem that we have got to really address. Fiona Lees used to say that we're not here to admire a problem, we're here to tackle it, which always used to make me laugh. But it's a question of, well, you can say that, but what do we actually do about it? So I have no answer at this stage. I'm just saying that I think that that is a problem that we need to look at carefully.
Thanks, Jane. I see Richard nodding in agreement there. Councillor Scobie.
I must say, Jane Maitland makes an interesting point there of one department not knowing what the other one's doing, and then we go into the other bodies and how are they ever going to try and do that. So there's a really, and the risk that's associated with that, which is really quite interesting. I have a number of points, Chair, whether you want me to take them one by one or all together. I'll start anyway, Chair.
Yeah, take them together and we'll see how far we get.
Right,
if
how far we get.
Some of them we can come back.
Right. Just to keep the focus on it, and it's in 3.1 under digital, and it'll come as no surprise to yourself and others, Chair. I raised this at education, and it's, you know, the rolling out of broadband to our more rural areas, and particularly with kids who are at school and maybe doing home studying and so forth. And during the height of the pandemic, they couldn't get access to some of our casework. So I think it's something that we need to keep our eye on and could keep continual pressure on Scottish Government on the rollout. That was one of our priorities, and I believe that it was Gavin who headed that up in terms of the whole rollout. I'm just making an observation on that one in the hope that we do at some time reach that point. My next point is on 3.3, and it's the bullet points continuing a focus on the health and social care staffing challenges, and I make no criticism of staff in this one, and then promoting career pathways and upskilling from entry-level posts. And it's the seriousness and the crisis that we are in, and that's not my words, that's the words of Audit Scotland, in terms of the care sector and delivering the care to people who are out there who have been identified as being in need of care. And only yesterday at Audit and Risk, we heard of a 1.7 million underspend, and it was the media that came back to me today. This is to people in supported direct or direct support, SDS, where that's something like they were quoting 25% of the budget that were not delivered. So that is a crisis in my mind. And I believe with your support, Chair, we managed to get a report up to the IGB, having raised it at the full council, then back here at the RRR subcommittee. But what we didn't get was the outcome of that report and how we tackle this. I do see this as, you know, only from yesterday, the care workers are getting an increase to £10 odd an hour, but that still falls well short of the value of care workers and it being a career structure. So my questions, it's more focus on and to highlight the seriousness of this. And as I say, Audit Scotland has done it just at the turn of the year, and they've made it clear to the Scottish Government that the care sector needs immediate reform, and hopefully we can get to the point where we are delivering the services that people require, because that's a huge risk, not only the council and the NHS, but for the people who aren't receiving that care. And my last question is around 3.7, following on to other paragraphs, and it's really the reopening of businesses, and businesses including the council, in terms of council offices, council buildings, and how we're approaching that. Because it does mention there about, you know, recovery and reopening and everything else. I think we need to also know what's happening to our offices. We've got libraries open, we've always had schools open to our credit, but there are other offices, and how that generates income in the local area. With people going to work, and I'm not taking away individuals in terms of working from home, but I think we do need to look at that and see what we're doing as we move further into, and I was corrected, from pandemic to endemic, and all that means. So I think we need to reach that point. That's 3 points, Chair.
Okay, I can say a bit about the IJB discussion, having been at it, but maybe hand over to Richard or Serena to take the other points that Councillor Scobie's raised.
Yeah, thank you, Leader. Again, Councillor Scobie makes a really important point in regard to digitisation, and I note the importance of lobbying, because that whole digital agenda, as we've said, is critical to developing alternative delivery models and ensuring a sustained focus on our council priorities in terms of being agile and providing affordable and achievable services and maximising the opportunities for those people to be connected digitally. So, I think there are well-established programmes in place, but COVID has just shone an even greater light on the importance of digitisation if we are going to be able to move forward in a more effective and efficient and economic way. So I'll certainly make sure as we move through this process, in terms of the key areas of work that will feature within each of those 6 themes, that both established and indeed new ways of working on that digital agenda feature in terms of our thinking. In terms of reopening of offices, we obviously had announcements over the last couple of weeks, which are the promotion of that hybrid working model, and we've promoted that within the council in terms of the return to the office estate. What we've also done through the COVID recovery group on Monday of this week is establish a sort of short life working group, which colleague Annie Johnson, who's been on the call, is going to chair, which just will ensure that the guidelines that we've got now in terms of the return to office accommodation and hybrid working are applied consistently across the council estate, if you like, and throughout services. And we also align that with some of our thinking around property and our asset planning, etc., so that everything's on the same page and we're considering everything in the round, so to speak. So hopefully that gives Councillor Scobie some assurances on both of those, Leader, and I'm happy to pass over to you in terms of the update from the IJB meeting. Thank you.
Yes, as members will know, I circulated the copy of the paper that went to the IJB so that you could see some of the ideas that were coming forward in terms of addressing the pressures on the Health and Social Care Partnership. There was extensive discussion at the IJB, in fact, to the extent that a number of the other items on the agenda weren't discussed because there wasn't any time left by the time we got the discussions on this paper were finished. So hopefully there will be something coming through out of all that. But in particular, I know Councillor Scobie had made the suggestion to Julie White that the area committees receive a report on the health and social care pressures in those areas. Members will know, of course, the Health and Social Care Partnership does report to area committees every 6 months. And I brought that request up to Julie during the meeting. I think that would be a very sensible thing so that members can have a local view on the problems in each of the 4 area committee areas. So we look forward to that being part of the reports in future that the Health and Social Care Partnership bring to area committees. So thank Councillor Scobie for that suggestion.
Thanks, Chair. From Richard and Serena in that. So it's good that digital's still to the fore and being an eye being kept on it in terms of the reopening and how we approach that. I think, in the hybrid's a good way of moving forward, because there may be people, or there will be people who want to work from home, but equally there'll be others that want to work in an office setting for their own mental health. So I think we've got to be conscious of that. It's not all about keeping people at home. It's also about allowing them back into the office so that they can get a sense of belonging and working with other people to share, particularly in social work, I would suggest, so that they can share casework, which must be put an awful lot of pressure if you're working on your own from home. So I think we need to look at both sides when we're looking at the hybrid approach to that. And to yourself, Chair, in terms of what was discussed at the IJB, in terms of how we approach this. I'm pleased to hear what you did say. If only they would get that out to us from the IJB, because the area committee, what I'm looking at, because I think Richard said at one of the meetings we had recruited 25 in our efforts to get out there and do positive promotion of the vacancies. But that's nowhere near to addressing the 3,500 hours. And it's to get it out there because we are relying on the resilience groups within the communities so that somebody isn't left isolated or in need of care, or somebody going along knocking at their door and saying, "Are you okay, Jeannie?" And it's that approach where the resilience groups in the communities play a massive part, and that are of great value. So that's why I asked, and I'm pleased that you're able to speak on that, Chair, and hopefully we'll hear from the IGB hopefully sooner rather than later. So thanks for that.
I'll certainly, if we haven't heard anything, and you're going to say that by the next IGB, I think there's another IGB meeting before I leave. If there is, I'll make sure that that's brought up when we come to the minute of the meeting. I've got
Thanks, Chair.
Councillor Thompson.
Thanks, Leader. Yeah, it's just on obviously there's a sort of workforce summit coming up, and it might sound like a bit of a daft question, but just looking at the key messages from the previous sessions at 3.3, clearly there's, I suppose, there's a demand or a need for, an identified need for staff across all the partners. That includes our own teams, that includes health, that would include third sector, I'm sure it will include police and fire and all other public bodies. And we've also got a desire and a drive through our South of Scotland Enterprise partners to increase and promote other kinds of opportunities for people, school leavers, all the rest of it. So how many people do we actually need is the basic question, because across all those sectors and given the existing vacancies, we might be able to address some of that with recruitment direct from schools if there's the right pathways, or by encouraging pathways for people who are unemployed or finding it difficult to get access to work, or for attracting people of the right sort of skills and capability, ready-made, if you like, into the region, whether that's virtually or physically. So, but it would be good to kind of know, well, including what we know we need for our health and social care, for example, which is obviously a key concern just now, how many people do we need to make Dumfries and Galloway PLC work? I suppose that, I don't know if anybody can answer that. And is that something that the Workforce Summit will discover?
Richard, is that a question that we can answer?
Thank you, Leader. It's not, Councillor Thompson will not be surprised to hear, I guess, that it's not an answer I can provide. What I can say is that, and that's probably because it's ever changing. We've made reference, Councillor Scobie made reference earlier to the 24, 25 individuals that we brought into the health and social care sector, aligned with CAS, as the internal provider. But I do know that concurrently we lost a significant number of people from that same workplace. So it's a really fast changing picture. What I can say, Councillor Thompson, is that I think the numbers we're talking about are significant, and they're significant across a really broad and wide range of professional posts, if you like, at a senior level to operational posts and posts that are frontline critical services. So I think the bullet point list that we've got at 3.3 really allows for a broad approach, whereby we nothing's off the table. We want to absolutely work very closely with our schools and with our other education providers in terms of making sure that we have individuals who are doing the right qualifications, where we have vacancies and who are fit to plug those gaps, so to speak, as soon as possible with the right coaching and training and mentoring moving forward. But also we want to make the region, as it says, a place where people want to come and work. And we want to work together across all of those agencies to make these opportunities as appealing as possible, but also to do it in a much more collaborative way, so that where there are opportunities to align job descriptions and indeed, dare I say, having working across more than one partner agency, then we're exploring all those things. And I think that's what's exciting about the multi-agency approach to this topic, and that's what the summit will look to drive forward. Thank you.
Councillor Thompson, just say that as far as the Community Planning Partnership is concerned, this is actually one of the standing items on the agenda of the Community Planning Partnership, because there's a realisation across the partnership that all partners have issues about recruitment and will have increasing issues about recruitment as the demographic change, which is projected for Dumfries and Galloway, bites. So it's something which the CPP board is taking seriously as well. Is there anything further that you want to raise on that, Councillor Thompson?
I fully take the point, and it's not something that I'm unfamiliar with in the sense. I think it was just really, if all the partners are in the table and we have a snapshot at any given time will say, we know across all the sectors, here's how many people each of those partners needs, because there is the danger that we take from one to fill the vacancies in another. So we're, holistically, we're not any better off. So I think it's really just to get around that. So if the partners are all around the table and we have a partnership response, there should be a partnership answer to that question, hopefully by after the next summit. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Hisnall.
Thank you, Leader. It's encouraging, but there's sort of encouragement there, but there's also the sort of downside. Richard was there saying that we had brought in 25 people, but we've lost X amount of people. And are we still in the response part of response, renewal and recovery? And is the plan there ready to go for when we come out of it? Because we seem to, before Christmas, we thought things were getting better. Then Omicron came along and then we stepped back again. So have we sort of bottomed out, do you think? And we can now look to implement the recovery and the renewal going forward. And the other one with regard to the digital enhancements, I think that's a good thing, because there are sections in the council that are suffering just now. The one that comes to mind is planning, whereby officers who are working from home cannot access back office systems to allow them to do their job, which is slowing down the process. And, whether it's like after the war, we're going to build our way out of the recession. If that's the case, we need to have the planning there to actually take this forward, rather than, we can't get anything done because we can't get the computer to work. So I think we do need to concentrate on digitalisation. And I think, as Councillor Scobie said, there may be a case, can we get more people to use the offices just now to allow that to move ahead?
Richard?
Thank you, Leader. Thanks, Councillor Hislop. I think it's a really important and really interesting point, and I guess one that we've been working on and wrestling with for a few months now. And I don't think, whilst there's been a start to the pandemic, I don't see any of us see an end at the moment. And as we said previously, I think it's about if we're moving into back to embed either aspects of response or aspects of recovery into services and indeed through service committee and supporting, then it's really important that we have the ability and the capacity to be able to flex and respond accordingly if there is indeed another different variant that might well come along. And I guess a good example might be that one of the things I've been talking about, in terms of community testing and vaccinations, and we know that there's key areas that require in that regard to flex, and we need to provide additional capacity when there is a surge in cases, etc. So, the likes of the community resilience function, is likely to be an area whereby we'll need to make sure that through that service we're able to respond in a similar way to the RRR team has been able to respond thus far. and in all the other areas aligned with recovery, I guess the same. And just going back to Councillor Maitland's point, it's critical, therefore, that colleagues who are supporting the community planning agenda are driving this multi-agency approach to make sure that we're doing things differently, learning from how we've operated and getting different results and different outcomes. Because the workforce one's a good example as well. As we say, we were successful in bringing new people in team, but at the same time, some of those people left the private or third sector operators in the same service area. So we need to try and attract new people, and the only way we can identify where those new people can come from and is by working together and doing it in that joined up approach. So there's no easy answer, I don't think, but embedding it into how we work, but how we work differently, and potential different structures moving forward, I think is going to be pretty critical.
Thanks. Ivor, did you want to come back?
No, thanks.
Councillor Scobie.
Yeah, it was just on the last point Ivor raised, and then Richard responded to it, and this idea of recruitment and so forth and so on. And you're watching some of these soaps or whatever they are, and nurses, because of the pressure that they've suffered over the last 2 years and the workloads and so forth, I believe, I've got nothing statistical to base it on, but they're also leaving the service because of the sheer pressure, post-traumatic stress, from what they have seen and so forth and so on, with no statistical details. So recruitment is a huge issue. I'll make the point in social care, but it's also in healthcare and so forth and so on, as for teachers and everything, how we promote the area. And it's really, I know we've got a new comms guy in place. I say that because I can't remember his name. But do we use enough of the media, the local papers, to try and get this case over as to how we're tackling the issue and what we hope to achieve both locally and nationally? We're making partnerships with further afield with Mid and East Antrim and so forth. It's really, how do we use the media to get the message over, and people picking up the paper, the local paper, as they do, and seeing, hey, there's a vacancy there. I could be doing a couple of hours a week or whatever it is, and getting it's not a good story, but it's getting the attention or the public to say, you got a couple of spare hours, you could be employed as a care worker or in whatever. And I just make the point, are we using enough of the resources? I think Stephen referred to it as Dumfries and Galloway PLC. So we've got comms person in place and others. How do we use that to get the story out there? Or the information out there, and I don't think we use it enough.
Richard?
Thanks, Leader. I think you're absolutely right, Councillor Scobie. And again, I'm going to suggest that the way that we've worked within the area of comms and media over the past 2 years has been different to how potentially we worked previously. There's been much more collaborative working and joined up thinking around things like the recruitment events, where the number of agencies, I think, got to a point where you use a national digital platform and expect us to fill every vacancy that comes along, whereas the reality of what we learned with the fast track recruitment events was that going back to local promotions, local media, word of mouth, local social media platform advertising campaigns actually allowed us to produce better results. So I think that how the comms teams and the media teams work together moving forward needs to continue to be different and much more closely aligned. You mentioned recruitment, Councillor Scobie, but we've also talked about retention, and as you say, nurses may well be leaving their industry. We've seen individuals leaving our areas of work as quickly as we're managing to bring new people in, in the front door, so to speak. So the mental health and well-being of our workforce is critical. We're about to embark on these supportive discussions with staff. I've been talking in my fortnightly meetings with the joint trade unions about ensuring that we've got these values and beliefs and support to staff are embedded in everyday working practice with managers, and that's absolutely critical. So I think there are a number of things that, again, the COVID has allowed us to have a sharp focus on, both in terms of recruitment, doing things differently, working with partners, and I think comms and media is critical with that, but also retention and the health and well-being of our staff, and how our values and behaviours, in everyday working life are critical in terms of moving us forward in a positive vein.
Good to come back, Chair.
Yeah, thanks, Richard. Willie.
Quickly, aye, a minute. I take everyone on board, but it was from the point of advertising and whatever. Sometimes, and I know that social work chief officer is recently going to the press on articles. And sometimes people get a lot more out of an article than they would look at an advert in the paper. I'm not trying to take away the income of our local papers, but sometimes it's an article, and the papers are always looking for copy. And it's sometimes an article can get much more effect than maybe an advert on jobs. And I'm not saying don't advertise. I'm saying that an article, put in the case, but with a purpose to say we are looking to recruit in whatever field. That's the only point I'd make, Chair, but I'm sure Richard will take on board. Thanks, Richard.
Thanks again. I can see Richard nodding there. Councillor Hislop.
Thank you, Lee. It's just to follow up on Willie's points there. I think Richard hit it in the head, that earlier, that if we advertise locally, we'll get from the local pool, and what happens is it's like dairy farming. As soon as a dairyman retires, you can guarantee next week there'll be an advert for a dairyman at that farm. 2 weeks later, there's an advert for a dairyman at another farm because the one from the other farm's left. And all you're doing is, I think they say, is it shifting the deck chairs in the Titanic. And I think we do need to look slightly out with our borders, bring people in, make sure that we are attracting people to Dumfries and Galloway. And another thing I think I've noticed, maybe it's just people I've spoken to, Willie says about there's a job for 2 hours looking after someone. But are people looking for those jobs now? Or are they seeing that through the pandemic, work as many hours as I did, I can spend more time with my family, and instead of having 3 holidays a year, I'll just have 2, and I've actually got a easier lifestyle because the stress isn't there. And are we suffering from that as well?
Richard.
Thanks, Leader. I think there's a whole mixed bag in there, Councillor Hislop, in terms of that very position, in terms of individuals wanting to reconsider their work-life balance and potentially reducing their hours of work for various reasons. I think, and again, we need to, learn from some of the things that we've recently put in train, and the fast-track recruitment events, where we were actually able to speak to people. And one of the first things that we did when individuals came to those events, where we didn't advertise one particular vacancy in one area of service, but various opportunities across the council. And when those individuals came to those meetings, we were able to have an open conversation, and, if you like, triage their needs and their aspirations with the opportunities that we then had, not just in terms of the type of work they were doing, but the hours they wanted to work as well. And some of them actually wanted to reduce the full-time hours, as you say, but some of them came with a view that they wanted to do a certain job for a certain number of hours, but actually left with 2 jobs for the same number of hours or slightly more. And just having that opportunity to have dialogue with individuals at a local level really worked. And that's something that I know Mike is keen to embed into the sort of ongoing recruitment way of working, if you like, across the council moving forward, just to try and meet individuals' different needs and aspirations and match them up in the job market.
No. Any further questions for Serena and Richard? Give it a minute.
Sorry, Leader, I'm grappling with my...
Oh, right, Jane, come in.
No, I was just going to say that's a really interesting approach, and I think lends itself to cross-agency working, just exactly as we've been doing. And I do commend that. Just to say that we were in this response, renewal and recovery sub, we were supposed to act as the reporting committee, I think, on what's happening with as far as the EU is concerned, as Brexit. And it's just raised its head again, Leader, today, really talking about issues of how difficult it is to do business. And I just don't want to lose sight of that as something which has been impacting upon what this council has been able to finish. So I just wonder if I can ask Richard, through you, about what is going on in respect of Brexit EU activity.
Thanks, Jane. That's a good point there. Richard.
Yeah, thank you, Leader. Thank you, Councillor Maitland. Interesting again, my colleagues and I were having a topic only last week because of the things that were happening over the water in Ireland and the potential implications thereof. I think from an operational perspective, obviously colleagues like Sandra Harkness in Trading Standards and Environmental Health have been closely aligned from a service-specific nature in terms of changes around EU exit. But from a sort of overarching perspective, there's been very little in terms of action required or reporting required up until this last sort of couple of weeks, where we're just keeping a very close eye on things. Notwithstanding that, if there is a need and a requirement to escalate matters in relation to border control posts and or anything other than that we've been looking at, then that will be taken forward through the relevant service committee moving forward in the absence of the RRR team. But as I say, I think probably the fact that we've not had anything on this agenda for a wee while is just a reflection of the fact that things haven't really moved to the size and scale, extent, and as a consequence having the implications as we perhaps thought they might when we established this subcommittee. But we'll make sure they are picked up and they're reported through the appropriate service committee moving forward.
Thanks. Jane, anything further?
No, it's just thinking about the workforce, having to change our models of work. We are all going to have to do. We're all going to have to do a few.
I'm not hearing you terribly well, but I don't know whether that's just me or whether it's a problem at your end.
Sorry. No, all I was going to say is that I just wondered whether, is that better or have we still got problems?
Yes, that's better, yeah.
Well, I just moved my laptop away from the machine. Maybe that's helped. No, what I was going to say is it's about the impact of workforce. I don't know whether we have got an absolute exact handle on who we've lost, particularly from the care sector, whether that has been a problem in particular, and whether that's something which we can flag up and say we particularly suffered. I don't know whether that's the case or not, because there are nurses coming in from abroad. They're being brought in. There is medical staff being brought in. So I just wonder whether or not there is anything to be said about whether we have done particularly badly through EU loss of workforce or not.
Thanks. Richard, are you able to, sorry for my exit at that point. I have a dog barking very loudly, so I got rid of her. Richard, can you answer any of that?
Thanks, Leader. Certainly there's been nothing that's been escalated to me in terms of that being the key focus and the critical issue in terms of the workforce themselves. Not having said that, Councillor Maitland, I think again you raise a really interesting point and something for the Workforce Summit and or in advance of the Workforce Summit for us to fully understand any potential implications is something that I'll make sure we cover within in the planning for that event.
Thanks, Richard. Any further comments or questions? Right. If there isn't, I think that is it. We're being asked to note the progress being made in relation to the Community Planning Partnership COVID Recovery Plan and also the approach to the recovery plan within the Council's own activities and services. Be happy to note that. Think so. No, any suggestion? We're not. So I've not been notified of any urgent business, and therefore I'd like to thank members for their attendance. I just ask Richard, there's not a date specified for another meeting. Is there likely to be one before the end of this term of the council?
In your hands, Leader. I think we thought at one point that there might not require the need to be one, but certainly happy to have a discussion and squeeze one in if that's the desire of members. No problem at all.
I think maybe monitor how things are going. It's always a pretty fluid situation still, so let's see if there is anything that, obviously we don't want to just have a meeting for the sake of having a meeting, but if there is something substantive that we need to discuss, we could call a meeting. But if there are no further meetings of this subcommittee, and this is my last time of chairing it, can I thank everybody who has contributed towards the deliberations of the meeting and including the officers, obviously, who have reported to us. So thank you all for that.